You think you're awake. You pay your bills, drive your car, meditate, read spiritual books. You even say things like, "I'm becoming more conscious." But what if none of that means you're awake at all? What if the voice telling you, "I've awakened," is just part of the dream? The truth is harsh. Most people live inside a mental simulation and call it reality. You think your thoughts are yours, your reactions are justified, your memories accurate, but they're all part of a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep you asleep. Still not convinced? Try this. Where were you before your next thought appeared? Who decided what you just felt? You didn't. It all just happens. The mind runs the show, and you believe it's you. That's the dream. A dream so vivid you forgot it's not real. This video is not about adding another belief. It's about peeling everything away. If you've ever felt like something is off, like there's a layer behind the world that you just can't name, you're closer than you think. Because the moment you start questioning who's really watching, everything begins to crack. 1. The dream of the mind. Most people don't live in reality. They live in their mind's interpretation of it. Thoughts arise like a never-ending stream, and instead of noticing them, we believe them. We build an identity out of ideas we never chose. And when that identity starts awakening, what often happens is that it simply picks up new thoughts, new spiritual ones. Same illusion, dressed in robes. What we call growth is sometimes just the ego learning new lines. You hear people say things like, "I'm becoming more aware." But are they? Or are they just thinking differently? Mental clarity feels like awareness, but it's not the same. Awareness is still. Thought moves. Imagine standing in a river, watching it flow. Most are swept away, convinced the water is them. True presence is standing on the shore. Most people are drowning in perception, and they don't even know it's water. A man wakes up, reads a book about enlightenment, and suddenly sees himself as awakened. But look closer. Is he aware, or is he just excited by the story of awakening? There's a difference, a big one. Awareness doesn't need a title, it doesn't wear a badge. When it's real, it's silent. It watches without needing to explain itself, but the mind loves to explain, to define, to label, and that's where it tricks you. The scariest part? You can believe you've broken free while still being fully inside the dream. Like lucid dreaming inside a nightmare. You might gain control, but you haven't left the illusion, not yet. And that's where the next layer of the dream begins, where even awakening becomes just another identity. 2. Awakening as an idea. It's easy to confuse awakening with information. You read a few books, listen to Ram Dass, maybe quote a bit of Alan Watts, and suddenly feel like you've transcended the old self. But all that's changed is the storyline. Now, instead of being John the Anxious, you're John the Awakened. Same actor, new costume. The ego doesn't die. It just rebrands. And that's the danger. Awakening becomes another identity to defend, another illusion to uphold. The language changes, but the illusion remains untouched. You start noticing it in conversation. Someone speaks about chakras or karma or presence, but the energy underneath is still grasping, still performing, still trying to be seen as one who knows. That's not awareness, that's ego dressed in white. True awakening doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to be understood, liked, or approved. It's quiet, gentle, almost invisible, but the mind wants to wear it like a badge. Look at me. I've awakened. No, friend, you've just upgraded the illusion. Think about it practically. If you can talk about your awakening, define it, compare it, then who's doing that talking? It's not silence. It's the self. It's the storyteller still at work, crafting a better version of the same identity. And ironically, the more attached you become to this new image, the further you drift from real awareness. You don't need to stop reading or learning, but you do need to see who's trying to benefit from it, who's trying to become the awakened one. That's the trap. So next time you catch yourself thinking, I'm more conscious now, pause, not to judge, but to look. Who is it that wants to be seen as conscious? Who's still at the center of that thought? Awakening isn't becoming something better, it's the falling away of the one who wants to be better. And when that falls away, something much more real begins to reveal itself. But the mind won't like that. It'll cling harder, it always does, especially when the illusion starts to look holy. 3. Signs you're still dreaming. You know you're still dreaming when you get offended, when you compare yourself to others, when you need someone to recognize your growth. That's not awareness, that's identity playing dress up. The spiritual ego is harder to catch because it hides behind beautiful words and soft tones. But listen closely. If you're still reacting, still defending, still needing to be seen, you're not awake. You're just in a dream that feels sacred. Let's say someone challenges your beliefs. Maybe they call out your spiritual practices. If that stings, if you feel the need to justify or correct them, what's really happening? The identity, this new, awakened self, is being threatened. Awareness doesn't flinch, it doesn't argue, it observes. But the ego? It needs validation, even in silence. And in the spiritual game, it craves to be the one who gets it. That craving? That's the dream, alive and well. You'll notice it in the small things too. You hear someone talk about presence, and part of you wants to outshine them. You post something deep online, then obsess over likes. You meditate, then judge others who don't. That's the ego feeding itself, wearing a spiritual mask. This isn't to shame, it's to see. Because until you recognize the patterns, they own you. And these patterns are subtle. They whisper, not shout. There's a version of the dream that feels calm, centered, even wise. But it's still a dream if you're clinging, if you need it to be true. Real awakening feels like nothing, because it's not about you anymore. It's not something to achieve or protect. And the more you need to prove it, the clearer it becomes. The illusion is still running, still pretending, still narrating. But something deeper is already watching, always has been. 4. The self is a sleepwalker. The one who says, I am enlightened, is usually the furthest from it. Why? Because the identity that wants to be seen as awake is still playing the same old game. It's just wearing softer colors now. The ego doesn't disappear when you enter the spiritual path. It adapts. It studies the right words, learns the correct posture, and then claims victory. But the real awakening doesn't happen to the self. It happens from the self. And that shift, it leaves no one behind to boast about it. Picture this. You're in a dream, and you become aware that you're dreaming. But then, instead of waking up, you start building a better dream. You become the enlightened dreamer. That's exactly what the ego does. It realizes the mind is an illusion, then says, I get it now. That I, that's still the dream talking, still the illusion pretending it's real. Awareness doesn't say, I'm awake. It just sees. It just watches. It has no need to declare anything. It's funny how the self tries to use enlightenment as an achievement, as if truth is something to possess. But what if the deepest awakening isn't a gain? It's a loss, a soft crumbling of the story you've been telling. The mind hates that. It wants to be the main character in its own spiritual movie. But the screen presence fades when awareness steps in. That's when something real begins, quiet, empty, free, not for the self, but from it. So the next time someone says, I've awakened, ask yourself, who is speaking? Is it silence, or is it still the voice of identity? Because the true light doesn't shout. It doesn't even whisper. It just watches, without ownership, without pride. And the moment you see that the self was just a sleepwalker, trying to wake up inside its own dream, you start to feel something different, a stillness, a gap. And inside that gap, something else is waiting. 5. What's watching the dream? If you're inside the dream, there must be something outside of it, watching. That's the part nobody talks about, the one that doesn't move when the story changes, the one that didn't disappear when your beliefs collapsed. That quiet space behind the noise, that's awareness. It's not thinking, it's not trying, it's not seeking, it's just there, watching thoughts rise and fall like waves on a shore it never leaves. And the moment you notice that watcher, something shifts. The illusion flickers. Let's make it real. Think about a time you got angry, not just irritated, really angry. Later, maybe you said, "I lost myself." But who was it that knew you lost yourself? That awareness didn't get angry. It noticed anger. That's the difference. That's the crack in the illusion. The mind reacts. Identity defends. But awareness, it never moves. It sees the chaos, but isn't touched by it. It watches the dream, but it never falls asleep. You don't have to find awareness. It's not hidden. You're using it right now, noticing these words, feeling this breath. It's not mystical, it's immediate. Try this. Close your eyes and listen. Not to sounds, but to the space between them. That's awareness. It doesn't label, it doesn't judge, it doesn't say good or bad. It simply notices. And in that noticing, the dream starts to dissolve, not all at once, but enough for the light to get in. What makes this so strange is how ordinary it is. You've been it your whole life. Before the roles, before the beliefs, before the voice in your head started talking, that presence never left. It watched your first heartbreak, your biggest mistake, your deepest joy. It's the only thing that never changed, and once you start seeing from that place, not the mind, not the story, you begin to wake up, not by force, just by seeing. But what happens when the thoughts finally go quiet? 6. When thought falls silent. Most people are terrified of silence, not the outer kind, the inner kind, that space where thought slows down and suddenly there's no script to follow, no role to play. But in that space, something incredible begins. Not a new version of yourself, not a better idea, just presence, just stillness. When the illusion of thought takes a break, what remains isn't emptiness, it's expansion. Like stepping out of a noisy room and realizing you can finally hear yourself breathe. Have you ever sat by a lake early in the morning? When the water is still, the trees reflect perfectly. That's what happens when thought gets quiet. You don't disappear, you reflect clearly. Awareness becomes visible, not as a concept, but as a direct experience. And here's the strange part. Nothing dramatic happens. You don't become enlightened. You just stop pretending. There's no fanfare, just a deep, wordless knowing that this silence, is more real than any story the mind ever told. Want a way to feel it? Next time you're overwhelmed, don't reach for a solution. Don't chase the answer. Just pause, sit, and say nothing. Let the thoughts pass like weather. Don't fight, don't follow, just watch. Eventually, something settles. Not because you controlled your mind, but because you stopped believing every thought was important. That space, that gap, is where truth begins to whisper. Not in words, but in peace. The mind will try to come back. It always does. It'll ask, what's the point, or what should I do now? But you don't need to answer. Let the question echo and dissolve, because what remains when the noise fades is you. Not the thinker, not the doer. Just this quiet, open awareness that needs nothing. That's not the end of the journey, it's the doorway. But to where, and who steps through it? 7. Waking up is remembering. You've never truly been asleep. That's the secret. You only believed the dream was you. From the moment you were named, praised, blamed, and shaped, you began mistaking the story for the source. But underneath it all, something stayed untouched, something simple, silent, watching. Awakening isn't about adding anything new. It's about stripping everything false. You don't become aware. You remember you are awareness. The forgetting was the dream. The remembering is the shift. Think of it like clouds covering the sun. The clouds come and go, emotions, thoughts, identities, but the sun never moved, never dimmed. That's what waking up feels like. Not some grand revelation, but a soft return. A quiet noticing of what's always been here. You don't have to fix yourself. There's nothing broken. You just stop clinging to the clouds, stop chasing a better version of the illusion, and let the light through. Simple, subtle, unmistakably real. This doesn't mean life stops. The world keeps spinning. People still talk. The mind still tries. But now there's space between you and all of it. You don't cling to praise. You don't run from pain. You stop searching for meaning in things that were never meant to last. And in that stillness, life becomes vivid again. Not because it's perfect, but because you've stopped trying to control it. You let it be, and somehow that makes everything clearer. So here's the question. If the dream isn't you, then who's been watching it this whole time? Not the thinker, not the identity, not the role. Something deeper, something quieter. And now that you've remembered, will you keep watching, or will you fall back asleep, chasing a dream you were never meant to be?